You know that moment when the alarm goes off and everything inside you screams to stay in bed. It's not just physical tiredness, often it's a deeper internal resistance. I like to call this the limbic barrier, a kind of emotional and mental block that happens when the brain prefers the comfort of inertia over the discomfort of action. This resistance isn't just about laziness or lack of discipline. It's connected to our limbic system, the part of the brain responsible for emotions, instant gratification, and aversion to effort. That's why, even when we know we have important things to do, our mind tries to convince us to stay in bed for just 10 more minutes. But here's the point: overcoming that initial friction, that invisible weight, is where real change begins. It's when you choose to act without feeling like it, without motivation, that you start training your brain to be guided by goals, not by fleeting emotions. You know that moment when the alarm goes off and everything inside you screams to stay in bed. It's not just physical tiredness, often it's a deeper internal resistance. I like to call this the limbic barrier, a kind of emotional and mental block that happens when the brain prefers the comfort of inertia over the discomfort of action. This resistance isn't just about laziness or lack of discipline. It's connected to our limbic system, the part of the brain responsible for emotions, instant gratification, and aversion to effort. That's why, even when we know we have important things to do, our mind tries to convince us to stay in bed for just 10 more minutes. But here's the point: overcoming that initial friction, that invisible weight, is where real change begins. It's when you choose to act without feeling like it, without motivation, that you start training your brain to be guided by goals, not by fleeting emotions. What really happens in these moments of resistance is what neuroscientists call top-down control. That is, your conscious, rational brain trying to command the more primitive and emotional parts of the mind that want to avoid discomfort. When you feel fatigue or a lack of motivation, this higher system tries to take control by saying, "Despite everything, I'm going to push through." The internet is full of strategies for this, from productivity techniques to motivational speeches. But in the end, motivation can come from anywhere: love, responsibility, commitment, or even anger. There's no single right emotional fuel. For some, the drive comes from caring for someone, like getting up early to pick up a friend from the airport. For others, it comes from their own identity: "I'm someone who honors what I promise." Both are valid triggers for action. This is where slogans like "just do it" make sense. They appeal directly to this kind of internal command that ignores emotional fluctuations and executes the action, even without motivation. The same top-down system is also behind our ability to resist harmful impulses, like the urge to eat something we know isn't good for us. And interestingly, the more rested and aware we are, the stronger our ability to exercise this self-control. When I observe people with extraordinary discipline, like elite athletes or individuals who seem to have an unshakable internal engine, I often wonder what truly drives them. I don't know Ronda Rousey personally, but I do know David Goggins, who even visited my lab. And I can say he is an extreme example of mental strength. He needs no introduction. His impact speaks for itself. One of the greatest lessons David teaches is about overcoming what I call limbic friction, that internal resistance that tries to stop us from taking action. He not only learns to live with this discomfort, but he has developed a kind of intimacy with it. He understands the story that is being written during the discomfort. He recognizes, "If I get through this, I will find a better version of myself on the other side." That's the key. He has internalized the idea that overcoming resistance is the path to victory, and that this process, as uncomfortable as it may be, is exactly where transformation happens. More than that, he knows how to emotionally connect with what comes after. He has learned to anticipate the feeling of achievement, to visualize the emotional reward even before it arrives. That's applied neuroscience. When you can clearly imagine the feeling of victory, your brain starts releasing dopamine just from the expectation, and that gives you energy to act now. So, the challenge is this: start training your mind to taste victory before it happens. When you learn to associate present effort with future reward, getting out of bed is no longer a sacrifice. It's the first step toward becoming who you want to be. Recently, a scientific study brought a fascinating insight: the famous delayed gratification, that ability to resist immediate pleasure, is directly linked to dopamine, the neurotransmitter of motivation and reward. What this study shows is the following: when you resist a temptation, whether it's eating that chocolate at the wrong time or staying in bed for another 30 minutes, and you know that this effort is leading you to something greater, your brain starts releasing dopamine even before the final achievement. In other words, the simple act of saying no to immediate comfort can, in itself, trigger your brain's reward system. This completely changes the narrative, because what once seemed like mere suffering or sacrifice now becomes a sign that you're on the right path, and that generates real motivation. Of course, this doesn't mean the process becomes easy. David Goggins himself, one of the greatest examples of mental resilience, speaks openly about how extremely challenging it is to maintain this kind of discipline. It's not enjoyable all the time. In fact, it's often brutal. But what sets these people apart is that they've developed a clear vision of the future reward. They've already visualized the victory before it even happens, and that changes everything. Most people can't overcome limbic friction, that internal block between intention and action, because they still don't know what victory feels like. They don't have an emotional reference point for what it means to get there. That's why they lack emotional strength in the moment of choice. The secret, then, is to train the brain to feel the taste of victory before achieving it. It's learning to find satisfaction in the act of resisting, because you know it's shaping the person you are becoming. The so-called limbic friction can be described as a powerful, almost irresistible, inner voice saying, "Stay in bed a little longer, rest is important, you deserve it." And it's not lying. After all, nowadays we constantly hear that good sleep is essential. But the problem arises when that justification becomes a mental trap that blocks action. Overcoming this impulse requires more than willpower. It requires what neuroscience calls top-down control. In other words, the rational part of the brain taking command over the more immediate and automatic desires. But here's the important detail: this resistance we feel is not a flaw. It's part of our survival mechanism. Think about it. Throughout evolution, seeking immediate comfort made sense. If you found shelter, food, or safety without effort, there was no biological reason to go in search of something harder. Instant gratification was, quite literally, a survival strategy. But human advancement and your own personal growth doesn't happen on autopilot. It comes precisely from those who go beyond natural impulses. People like Elon Musk, who challenge the limits of our species and ask, "Why stay only on Earth?" Or like Rich Roll, who overcame physical and mental limits to completely transform his life path. This ability to go beyond comfort is a trainable skill. Yes, there's neuroplasticity involved in this process. The more you force yourself to overcome doubt, hesitation, and the urge to stop, the more your brain learns to operate with courage, focus, and resilience. And this applies to everything. Your ability to focus improves when you force yourself to focus. Your ability to sleep improves when you train your mind to relax. And your ability to overcome limbic friction grows when you face it repeatedly. There are two main ways to do this. Train the behavior, even without feeling like it, such as getting up at the right time, even when your body wants the opposite. Increase your alertness by activating the dopamine and norepinephrine circuits, which many people attempt through caffeine, nicotine, or even medications like Adderall and Ritalin. But the most powerful tool isn't in substances. It's in developing the habit of pushing through discomfort with purpose. Because every time you overcome limbic friction, you're not just completing a task, you're shaping a new brain pattern of self-mastery. There's a powerful and even counterintuitive technique that some people use to overcome that mental block of not wanting to do anything. They basically take on a third-person perspective of themselves. It's as if you said, "Look at that guy lying in bed, full of excuses. Is he going to get up or give in to laziness again?" This shift in perspective may seem strange, but it's backed by neuroscience. It helps us separate our current state from who we really are. After all, the brain tends to identify with the present moment, with discomfort, fatigue, or doubt. And when that happens, it becomes almost impossible to move. but when we observe ourselves from the outside, as if we were a character in a movie, we activate circuits related to self-awareness and future planning. It's like hacking your own system. You see yourself not as you are now, but as the person you want to become. This strategic distancing helps break through limbic friction. Of course, some might joke that talking about yourself in the third person is something only a narcissist would do. And yes, there is a clinical term for that starts with N and ends with M. But that's not the point here. The goal isn't to inflate your ego. It's to create just enough mental space to escape the trap of the present moment. This technique is especially helpful when our inner narrative is stuck in the now. I'm tired. I can't do it. Not today. By projecting yourself as a future you, the one who's already out of bed, already trained, already fulfilled what they committed to, you begin to anticipate the reward. And that anticipation activates dopamine. Over time, this new behavior stops feeling like a constant struggle and starts becoming part of your identity. Just yesterday, for example, I used this exact strategy. I woke up, my brain throwing 1,000 excuses, and then I pictured my winning self already up, doing what I had promised myself I'd do. And, like a reflex, I went after him. The morning before, I made a simple decision. I agreed with my partner that we would go for a swim in the ocean. At sunrise, the day arrived, and of course, it was raining. The sky was overcast. The temperature was low, that typical scene that makes you think, is this really a good idea? And I'll admit, as we walked toward the beach, I was having an internal battle. I didn't say anything, but inside, my thoughts were, I hate getting into the water when it's cold. This is going to be awful. But guess what? When we finally got in, the ocean was warmer than the air around us. The water felt welcoming, and we were rewarded with a spectacular sunrise. The result, I felt energized, physically and mentally, for the entire day. That's the power of breaking through initial friction with small, bold actions. It might seem trivial, a recreational example, but it reveals something much deeper about how our brain works. We all have reward and self-control systems regulated by chemicals like dopamine and norepinephrine. And the most fascinating part is that we can learn to modulate these systems in real time, especially during moments of resistance, like getting out of bed, going to train, or starting a difficult task. I'm not saying you have to push through every single situation. That would be exhausting. But learning to do it in strategic moments can be life-changing. Think about it. People are using this kind of self-control to recover from addiction, rebuild their lives, and change deeply ingrained habits. And it all starts with a simple decision, to act even when your mind is screaming at you to stop. Many people think that in order to stay motivated, they always need to reward themselves whenever they achieve something. But the brain doesn't work that way. Our dopamine system, responsible for generating that sense of pleasure and achievement, is excellent at predicting rewards. And here's the problem: when rewards happen too frequently or in a predictable way, their effect diminishes. The amount of dopamine released drops. The achievement loses its spark. Sounds contradictory, right? But casino owners figured this out a long time ago. They know that intermittent reinforcement, the kind that happens unpredictably, is what most strongly activates the reward system in both humans and animals. That's why slot machines don't pay out every time. They keep you engaged through the element of surprise. And the same applies to your life. If you're working hard, training, studying, fighting to build something, yes, you should feel the progress. But the reward needs to be strategic. Don't celebrate every small step with a big reward. Once in a while, yes, treat yourself, feel the merit, acknowledge your progress. But sometimes, just move forward. Let the victory arrive as a surprise. That's when your brain will understand. This is too important to stop. This is the key to reconditioning your neural systems, to building resilience, to becoming someone who doesn't live for immediate pleasure, but for the construction of something lasting. Sometimes, the best thing you can do is not reward yourself. Yes, it sounds counterintuitive, but there's a mechanism in the brain called the dopamine prediction error. It's as if your brain is making a bet. If I do this, I'll get that. And when the reward doesn't come, the brain pays attention. It thinks, wait, maybe this is more important than I thought. Maybe I should keep going. Find out more. That's what keeps motivation alive. That's why the most powerful motivation pattern isn't receiving a reward every time. It's what we call intermittent reinforcement. Sometimes you have your coffee after 45 minutes of focused work. Other times, you skip the coffee and keep going. What are you doing? You're training your brain to value effort, not just the reward. It's like in classic games, Mario, Pac-Man, Sonic. You collect small coins, energy, power-ups. But the real game is about continuing to move forward, even without a reward. And that's how it works in real life too. You grow stronger when you keep going even without applause. You stand out when you learn not to rely on predictable rewards. That's where real transformation happens. You know those days when everything feels perfect. You slept well, had your coffee, you're listening to your favorite music. Beautiful day, no distractions. You're ready to train, run, create, and everything just flows. That's the perfect setup. But here's the problem: if you need all of that just to take action, you're in trouble. Why? Because not every day will be like this. Life is imperfect, loud, messy, and if you can only give your best on ideal days, then the ordinary days, which are the majority, will knock you down. This is what we call dopamine layering. You stack sources of pleasure and motivation, and then your brain gets used to that combo. Next time, if just one piece is missing, ugh, no music today, it's cloudy, I didn't sleep that well, you already feel defeated before you even start. So here's the real challenge. Be the person who takes action even when nothing is perfect. You don't need an ideal setup. You need intention, repetition, purpose. Real motivation is built when you show up without guarantees, when you run in the cold, without music, when you create in the chaos, when you do it because that's what you do. This year, I decided to do something different. Every third or fourth workout, at random, I leave my phone in the car. No music, no pre-workout, no external stimulation. Just me, my body, my mind, and the will to keep going. Sounds like masochism, maybe, but I see it as training what really matters, the strength that comes from within. Because it's easy to stay motivated when everything is perfect. The right music, caffeine in your veins, playlist on fire, everything dialed in. But real life isn't like that. And when you choose to deprive yourself of all of that, when you act even when you're not in the mood, you're teaching your brain to be strong without depending on anything. And you know what happens the next time you do use your phone, your music, your pre-workout. You'll feel like a god. Your brain will release even more dopamine. Your performance will skyrocket. But you're not a slave to it, because now you know you can still show up even when you have nothing. That is true power, true freedom, true motivation. There's something no one wants to talk about, but it's affecting an entire generation. Pornography. No moralizing, no judgment. Let's talk like scientists. Today, porn is everywhere. With one click, you have access to extremely intense scenes designed to max out your dopamine system. And what does that do to your brain? It trains it to expect something reality will never deliver. No matter how healthy, intimate, or beautiful real sex may be, it can't compete with the artificial sensory overload. And here's the problem: young people who can't connect with others, difficulty feeling pleasure through real touch, people conditioned to feel arousal only by watching, never by living. It's like eating burgers with cheese, bacon, ice cream, sugar, and deep-fried everything, all at once, every day. At some point, an apple just doesn't taste like anything. And worse, you don't even feel real hunger anymore, only hunger for excess. The brain gets addicted to the unreal, and it loses its ability to feel pleasure from what's natural. But the good news, you can reset. You can retrain your brain. You can learn to feel real life again and love it. You just need to reduce the overstimulation. Because when you do that, life starts to taste good again. Ask chat. Have you ever noticed how your brain sometimes seems to shut down? You're in a room, listening to someone speak, and suddenly, it's like your mind just drifts away. You're not being lazy. Your brain is reacting to lack of sleep, reacting to environments without fresh air, Two stuffy rooms with low light, low interaction, low interest. This is what we call brain fog, a state where everything feels slower, more boring, more heavy, and believe it, this has nothing to do with intelligence. It has everything to do with biochemistry. Your brain needs quality sleep, proper nutrition, not just calories, but real nutrients, movement, real opportunities for engagement. You can be wide awake watching a movie, but nearly asleep in a classroom, excited while gaming, but exhausted during a presentation. Context shapes your state, and sometimes all your body really needs is oxygen. Yes, oxygen. Breathe better, stretch, stand up, drink water, get some sunlight. So the next time you feel shut down, don't say you're unmotivated. Say, your environment needs to change. Say you need to reconnect. Say your brain deserves better conditions to function. Because it's amazing, but it's also organic. You know what's curious? I used to teach at night, and I loved it. Because at night, people talk more, open up more. They become more human. But there was always that student, one or two, sleeping. And you know what? I used to be that student too. I know how it feels. Sitting in a warm room, listening to a monotone voice, no stimulation, no movement, and suddenly, the class is over. You were there, but you weren't. And that's not laziness, it's your brain asking for something engaging. The world loves to label distraction as lack of focus. But when I researched ADHD, I discovered something powerful. People with ADHD don't have less attention. They have intense attention when they truly care. So maybe the right question isn't, why can't I focus? But instead, what lights up my brain? When you find that, focus shows up, energy comes back, sleep disappears, the mind awakens, and suddenly, everything makes sense. Want to know the secret behind attention? It's simple. Attention is desire, and desire is dopamine. Dopamine isn't just pleasure. It's the fuel for interest, for pursuit, for the will to keep going. And guess what? Ritalin, Adderall, these medications increase attention because they increase dopamine. If you enjoy what you're doing, if you care about the place, the topic, you're locked in. The world becomes vibrant, time speeds up. But if you don't like it, you drift, focus disappears, and that's natural. It's your brain saying, this isn't worth my energy. So, the real attention hack, it's not effort, it's discovering what you love. But what about boring, unavoidable tasks? Yes, they exist. And here's a trick, if you can't pretend to like them, use aversion to your advantage. That's what I did in school. There were subjects I hated, and instead of lying to myself, I said, okay, I hate this. But that hate triggers adrenaline, and adrenaline wakes you up. Gives you a shot to stay present. Sometimes, what you feel, even discomfort, can be your weapon. The key is knowing how to use it. Sometimes, you just can't pretend to like something. So, you pretend to hate it, with purpose. That's what I did. I took a subject I absolutely hated and thought, I hate this with everything I've got, and I'm going to beat it just to prove who's in charge. And suddenly, I was alert, engaged, like it was a fight. I was going to defeat that topic. And here's the curious part. Once you conquer something you hated, you start to like it. Why? Because you won. And winning releases dopamine. It builds self-esteem. It creates connection. Of course, it's amazing to follow what you love. But living only off passion is a luxury you can't always afford. Sometimes you have to do things you didn't choose. And that's part of becoming a functional adult. As Dr. Anna Lemke says, there are so many young people waiting for the perfect passion, something that engages them 100% with no effort, as if everything should be natural, easy, and flowing. But it's not always like that. Sometimes you have to enter through the back door, push through the friction, struggle, crawl, and only then you connect, you understand, you love, not because it was easy, but because you conquered it. If you're on your phone scrolling, without knowing why, without knowing what you're even looking for, your dopamine system has been shut down. And that's a serious problem. You need to take a break, maybe a few hours, maybe a few days. Don't get me wrong, I love social media. I teach science there. I see talented, funny, creative people. There's amazing stuff. useful stuff, hilarious stuff. But here's the difference: when you know what you're doing there, that's fine. But when you no longer even know what winning means on that feed, when you're just mindlessly engaging, dopamine isn't driving you anymore, it's being drained. And that messes with everything: your motivation, your focus, your sense of purpose. And here's another important point: a picture is worth 1,000 words. A video is worth 1,000 pictures. Our brain was designed to pay attention to motion, to visual stimuli. But when that stimulation is constant, with no pause, no direction, you're not watching, you're being pulled. And the question is, who's in control right now? You or the algorithm? So you're watching movie after movie after movie, scroll, video, post, ad, another one, and another. And what's happening? The context is changing every second, and your brain was never designed for this. Back in the day, TV had 6 channels, then 12, then to 100. But now, you carry the TV in your pocket, you watch it in the car, on the plane, in bed, and unlike emails or articles, social media throws you into 100 different contexts in 5 minutes. It's a novelty loop, and the brain loves novelty. But it's also a brutal overload. And you know what happens after that? The real world starts to feel boring. You see people at dinner, constantly checking their phones, not because they're rude, but because their brains are addicted to novelty. And little by little, everything else starts to lose its shine. These days, I turn off my phone in the afternoon. I don't check it during the first hour of the day. I do it for sanity. Because yes, social media has its place, but only when you're in control. When you connect your actions to your sensations and understand the science behind your mind, you realize it's not about quitting everything. It's about choosing when and how to engage. You know that urge to check your phone the moment you wake up? That's not just habit, it's dopamine. But listen, the phone isn't the villain. Just like calories aren't bad, excess is the problem. You're not opening your phone because you love what's there. You're opening it because your brain is chasing that hit, the perfect post, the right video, that one notification that might give you something. But what do you actually get? Tiny, minimal dopamine hits, 10, 20, 50 times. Nothing is enough. You're looking for pleasure, but really, you're just trying to feel normal again. It's like drinking salt water to quench your thirst. And that's how the dopamine system works when something is new and exciting. You get a spike, then it returns to baseline. That's natural. But if you keep forcing that system every day, what happens? Your normal drops. Now you need the phone, the screen, the stimulus, just to feel okay. It's not even pleasure anymore. It's emotional maintenance. You're not having fun. You're regulating. And that is the beginning of collapse. You're not chasing pleasure. You're fighting just to feel normal, fighting for neutral, as I call it. And that is addiction. You're using something compulsively just to avoid feeling bad. Not because you love it, not because it's fun, just so you don't sink. And most of us don't even realize it. You know what else is like that? Caffeine. For most adults, between 18 and 60 years old, daily caffeine intake isn't a problem. Until it is. It doesn't make you anxious. It doesn't trigger panic. You think it's fine because you can still fall asleep. But here's the truth. Even if you drink coffee at 3 p.m. and go to bed at midnight, your sleep is fragmented. Caffeine has a long half-life, which means that, hours later, it's still messing with your sleep architecture. Deep sleep, REM sleep, those critical stages are compromised. You might be asleep, but you're not recovering. So if you want real energy, mental clarity, focus, and well-being, it's not about more stimulation. It's about less noise, more discipline, less compulsion, and more awareness of what you actually need versus what your brain thinks it wants. You said, ask chat. You think you're chasing pleasure, but you're not. You're fighting to get back to neutral, just to feel normal. And that is addiction. It's compulsive use, not out of love, not out of passion, but just so you don't feel bad. Our dopamine system wasn't built for this constant overload. Dopamine is the molecule of wanting, of genuine interest. It drives real attention, curiosity, purpose, That's why medications like Ritalin and Adderall work. They increase dopamine, and with it, focus. But here's the truth. The most powerful way to hack attention is not chemical. It's emotional. When you love something, when you truly care, you naturally pay attention. When you don't care, you shut down. That's why the key is to find something you love, or at least something you want to master. And sometimes that thing starts with hate. I've forced myself to study topics I despised. I'd think, I'm going to beat this subject just to prove I can. And you know what happens? When you overcome friction, when you conquer something hard, you start to like it. Because liking is often the result of victory, not the cause. But you don't always get to choose, sometimes. Being a functional adult means facing what you don't enjoy. The problem is that today, many are waiting for a magical passion that will make everything feel easy. But sometimes the path is through the back door. You enter, struggle, and only then fall in love. Now, the opposite is also true. If you're on social media and don't even know what you're looking for, if you're scrolling out of habit, your dopamine system is drained. You need to stop. Maybe for a few hours, maybe for a few days, because your brain is being bombarded with context. Video, 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 peak, peak, peak. The human brain was never meant to handle so much change so fast. And when you get used to that level of stimulation, the real world starts to feel boring. You're addicted to novelty. But constant novelty creates exhaustion, not joy. That's why I turn off my phone in the afternoons. I try not to look at it for at least 30 minutes after waking up. I want to let my brain return to baseline, to feel, to think, to integrate what sleep processed. The phone isn't the villain. Excessive use is. Just like calories aren't bad, too many are. And speaking of sleep, you might think your afternoon coffee doesn't matter. But it does, even if you sleep. Your deep sleep and REM sleep are impaired. And those two stages are what determine whether you wake up feeling rested, alert, and creative. So yes, drink your coffee, but not in the 8 to 12 hours before bed. Caffeine blocks adenosine, the molecule that makes you feel sleepy. It doesn't give you energy. It just tricks your body. So even if you feel okay, you're not recovering. 90% of adults worldwide consume caffeine daily. It's the most popular drug on the planet. But what matters isn't the exception, it's the pattern. And the pattern is this: the more you rely on stimulation to feel okay, the more you're fighting for neutral. The key lies in intentional pauses, real attention, and understanding that true pleasure doesn't come from 1,000 little peaks, but from long effort, followed by a big reward. Now, let me tell you what really happens with caffeine. It blocks adenosine receptors. Adenosine is a molecule that builds up throughout the day and signals to your brain that you're getting tired. It's natural, it's biological, but when you drink coffee, tea, energy drinks, you're not gaining energy. You're just preventing your brain from realizing that it's tired. Caffeine tricked your body, but it doesn't destroy the adenosine. It just gets in the way. And when the caffeine wears off, all that built-up adenosine hits you at once. That's when the caffeine crash happens. Sudden sleepiness, midday exhaustion, the classic crash. That's why 90% of adults on the planet consume caffeine daily to feel normal. It's no longer about being more alert. It's about not crashing, not falling apart. And that's the same cycle as dopamine, as social media, as your phone, as forced productivity. You're not chasing pleasure, you're avoiding discomfort. You're just trying to get back to neutral. And that is the sign that maybe you need to redefine your inputs. Pause, breathe, reset. Because real focus, real energy, they don't come from the next cup or the next notification. They come from regaining control of your own system, from learning to care for your baseline. You wake up, grab your phone, jump from video to video, post to post, story to story, movie after movie after movie. And what's happening is that the context keeps changing. Your brain didn't evolve to handle this. It's too much stimulation, too fast, too frantic. And then, suddenly, real life feels boring. You're at dinner, but you reach for your phone. Because your brain craves novelty, it can't handle silence anymore. But this constant search for dopamine comes at a cost. You start living for the next peak, not for pleasure, but for relief. It's like dopamine is saying, you're not going up. You're just trying to get back to baseline. And that's addiction. Compulsive use just to feel normal. Now, think about caffeine. You take it for focus, energy, mental clarity. But what most people don't know is this: caffeine doesn't take you above normal. It just lifts you out of the hole that its own withdrawal created. Know why? Because most caffeine studies are done on people who are already addicted to caffeine. They go for days without it. They enter withdrawal, get slow, irritable, low energy. Then they're given caffeine again. And the result? Improvement. Of course there's improvement, but only compared to the withdrawal state, not to the natural, caffeine-free baseline. So basically, 90% of the adult population consumes caffeine every day, not to gain superpowers, but just to get back to zero. And the cherry on top: when caffeine leaves your system, all that blocked adenosine crashes down at once. And here comes the drop, the crash, the exhaustion. And then the cycle starts again. The truth is, you're not chasing pleasure. You're just trying to feel normal. But normal should be the starting point, not the finish line. So, if you're going to use caffeine, use it intentionally. Wait at least 90 minutes after waking before your first dose. To avoid the early crash, avoid caffeine 8 to 12 hours before bedtime. And once in a while, take a break. Just like you power down your phone in the afternoon, power down your dependency. Because real focus, real clarity, real pleasure don't come from stimulation. They come from balance. You wake up, grab your phone, scroll, video, story, post, notification, another video. Your brain wasn't built for this. You think you're having fun, but really, you're just avoiding boredom, avoiding silence, avoiding the absence of stimulation. It's not pleasure, it's compulsion. And behind it all is the same system: dopamine. Dopamine makes you seek, makes you repeat, makes you want more. But the more you consume, the less pleasure you actually feel. What used to be a high becomes just a breath. You're not chasing pleasure anymore. You're just trying to get back to neutral. And with caffeine, it's the same. You take it thinking you need more focus, more energy, more performance. But here's the catch. Most studies on caffeine are done on people who are already dependent on it. They go a few days without it, enter withdrawal, feel slow, tired, irritable. Then they take caffeine again, and they feel better. But they feel better compared to the hole created by withdrawal, not better than baseline. In other words, 90% of the adult population consumes caffeine every day just to feel normal. And more, caffeine blocks adenosine receptors. Adenosine is the molecule that makes you feel sleepy. But when the caffeine wears off, all that adenosine hits you at once. Here comes the crash, the drop, the exhaustion, and the cycle begins. Again, I talked about this on the podcast. There are a few clips going around. If you wake up and experience a sudden energy crash, try this. Wait 90 to 120 minutes before your first dose of caffeine. This helps stabilize your natural alertness levels without dragging you into a crash later. Want a real cognitive boost from caffeine? Then try this. Go for days without any caffeine. It'll be hard. You'll get headaches, fatigue, brain fog. You'll feel awful. But then, when you come back to it, you'll feel the real effect. Again, last time I did this was when I got sick. And honestly, sometimes I wonder, was that flu really just the virus? Or was it caffeine withdrawal in disguise? Because when I started drinking coffee again, I felt better. But was that healing, or just dependence masked as recovery? The hard truth: you're not chasing pleasure. You're just trying to get back to normal. But what if that normal is already compromised? What if you don't even remember what it feels like to be okay without external stimulation? Real energy, real focus, real clarity don't come from caffeine. They come from balance. Ask checked. You wake up, grab your phone, scroll, video, story, post, notification, another video. Your brain wasn't built for this. You think you're having fun, but in reality, you're just avoiding boredom, avoiding silence, avoiding the absence of stimulation. It's not pleasure, it's compulsion. And behind it all is the same system: Dopamine makes you seek, makes you repeat, makes you want more. But the more you consume, the less pleasure you feel. What used to be a high becomes just a breath. You're not even chasing pleasure anymore. You're just trying to get back to neutral. And with caffeine, it's the same. You take it thinking you need more focus, more energy, more performance. But here's the thing. Most caffeine studies are done on people who are already dependent. They go a few days without it. They experience withdrawal, sluggishness, headaches, irritability. Then they drink coffee and they feel better. But they're just feeling better compared to the hole their dependency created. 90% of the adult population consumes caffeine every day just to function at a normal level. And if you stop, headaches, fatigue, discomfort, brain fog, yes, even mild depression. Caffeine blocks adenosine receptors, the molecule that signals sleep. While it's in your system, you feel alert. But when it wears off, all that built-up adenosine hits at once. And what happens? The infamous crash. Then you need more caffeine, not to get ahead, but just to feel okay. This goes beyond caffeine. You're not chasing pleasure. You're trying to get out of the negative. Just like social media, fast food, gambling, porn, or any other easy dopamine hit. It's not that you want a high. You just don't want to crash. Want to truly feel the benefits of caffeine? You'll need to cut it out. Go for days to 2 weeks without it. Then when you return, you'll notice a real increase in focus, energy, and performance. But it's tough. You'll miss it. You'll feel symptoms. You'll think you're sick. Me? I can only do it when I catch a cold. And sometimes I wonder, is the discomfort I feel from the virus or just caffeine withdrawal? When I drink coffee again, I feel better. But is that health or just relief from dependency? And not everyone handles caffeine well. Some people are extremely sensitive. Heart palpitations, anxiety, tremors, even decaf is too much for them. These people don't need to push it. Going without caffeine won't hurt your health. In fact, some reports show that after weeks of daily consumption, the negative effects outweigh the positive ones, even for people who tolerate it well. So think about this. You drink coffee every day, scroll your feed every day, chase more stimulation, more dopamine, more up. But what if everything you're feeling is just you trying not to feel bad? What if your normal has already been hijacked? Real pleasure isn't in more stimulation, it's in getting your neutral back.